Welcome to Pirke Abot, Chapter 5, Mishnah 15, in which we discuss the very next Mishnah in our Perek. Today's Life ReImagined class is also dedicated in honor of Rabbi Farhi, Rabbi Mizrahi, and Rabbi Abragamov by Tali Shams, Hazaku Hiski Ve'imtzi. As well, Lunch and Learn's class is also dedicated in celebration of the wedding of Sili Sit and Elliot Braha. Mazal Tov! Sili is getting married this afternoon, and I'm going directly from here to Deal, New Jersey. Mashallah, Baruch Hashem.
Is that Poseidon?
No, that's another wedding. That's
Going to be good Poseidon and Adias?
Bezrat Hashem. I don't know for sure. I'm not sure.
Who's Adias?
That's Miami. We'll talk about that later. That's in a while.
No, I'm sorry, Rabbi. 19 of this month.
That's not Atias. That's Wagner. That's the other daughter.
I know, but what is the
Yeah, they don't need to know this. Okay. Sorry, guys. One is the December 19th. There's another one that's somewhere else. We'll have to chop this out. Okay. Last but not least, also today I will be going to see my son-in-law and daughter off to Eretz Israel. Along with them, they will be taking their luggage, but also stealing my granddaughter. So that is very, very sad that she's going to be there. But we're very, very happy that he's going to go be studying Eretz Israel to become a Torah scholar, and that they're going to be getting back to normal life. We wish them only the very best. And last but not least, happy birthday to Mrs. Mafar. Congratulations on, okay, happy birthday. You should have many happy returns, inshallah. Okay, let us begin. We ready? How long is my daughter going for? As long as it takes. As long as it takes Be'ezrat Hashem for him to become a rabbi. Okay. Says the Mishnah, Arba midot biyoshvim b'fnei chachamim. There are 4 measurements, 4 temperaments, 4 styles of those who sit in front of the chachamim, of the wise. Sfog, umashpech, mishameret, v'napa. There's 4 different types of students. One student is a sponge, one is a funnel, one is a strainer, and one is a sieve. Now the Mishnah explains what are these 4 things that we're actually describing in this mashal of the 4 different types of students that exist, that sit before the wise. And of course, as we always point out, who are the students? Me, you, all of us. If you're not a student, check in your membership card to the human race, to quote the honeymooners, okay? Chalas, you're done. You're done growing. So all of us are students, but there's 4 different types of students who sit in front of the wise. In front of somebody who teaches you wisdom, there are 4 types of students: a sponge, a funnel, a strainer, and a sieve. Tell me that does not sound like the like the title of your next book. No, it does not sound like. It's like the sponge, the funnel, the strainer, and the sieve was written. Okay. Says the Mishnah, Sfog shu sofeg et hakol. The sponge is a type of student that absorbs everything. Okay? When we talk about children, we say, wow, this kid picks up everything like a sponge. You should update your vernacular and talk about a vacuum cleaner. But either way, Sfog, he picks up everything like a sponge. Mishapech, says the Mishnah, mashpech, like a funnel. There's another student that takes in things in one side, what's a funnel, and just spits it out on the other side. Okay? Doesn't retain anything. The third is mishameret, bracha levatala, 100%. Third is mishameret, a strainer that rejects the wine. You pour the wine in, and what does it retain? All the sediment, all the pieces, that's what it holds on to. So, and finally, v'napa, and the last type of student is a sieve that rejects the coarse flour when you put in all the top, all the stuff the chaff, it takes all the pieces of the stalk, everything stays at the top, and the only thing that filters down is the flour, is the finest flour. Now, obviously, in separating these four, we understand that the best of the bunch is the napa, is the sieve. Okay, the sieve is the one that actually lets through all the good stuff and separates away all the bad stuff. Okay? Mishameret, by the way, the strainer on some level seems to be the same. The question though is, what is it trying to hold on to? So as an example, when you're straining the wine and pulling away the sediment, right, what's left in your hand is a sediment. When you're straining, right, or you're pouring the sieve, the flour into this sieve and you're shaking it out, what are you doing? Also the same thing. So these two things, they seem to be the same thing. And the point is that they are discerning. They are differentiating between the good and the bad. But I don't know. I think on a surface level, one could have imagined that either one of these could have been the good one or the bad one. The only difference is, what are you holding on to? What is the purpose? Sorry?
The napa is better because you're throwing bad things.
Strainer is doing the same thing. You're straining the sediment, and then you would throw the sediment out. So the only question is, from the mashal to the nimshal, why did we choose the strainer over the sieve over the strainer to be the good one? But in either scenario, the point is, it's taking the good and holding on to the good, or is it taking the bad and holding on to the bad? Okay? But either of these two are discerning. The sfog is something that is not discerning. It holds on to everything. The strainer is something also that is not discerning. It gets rid of everything. But there are four types of students. Okay? And now let's go through them echad echad. There are people that will remember everything. Now at first blush, the first thing you think is, wow, what a student. That's the best kind of student. The student that remembers everything. But in actual fact, that's not the best kind of student. That's a photocopy machine. And in fact, a student that can hold on to everything is a student that actually does not think through, try to decide what they want to retain. They haven't developed a relationship with the information. They haven't developed an opinion on the information. Why? Because why should I? I hold on to everything. Can I give you an example? Most of us in today's day and age, if you go to your phone, will find so many thousands of garbage pictures where you try to smile and you're like something like this. Just for the camera to catch that again. Right? Right? Or there's a picture of everyone in your family smiling and someone just with the blink, caught mid-blink. You took 9 pictures. How many of you delete every one of the bad ones and only save the good ones? 1, 2, 3, 4, right? Most people don't do that. Most people's phones are filled with tons of pictures that they never got the chance to delete. Okay? You know when you do that? When you have immeasurable and infinite amount of storage. So when your storage is just so plentiful that there's no point in deleting anything, so you just don't bother getting rid of information that you don't need. The svog is not necessarily a student which is not a talented student. In fact, they might have a better memory than any of the other people in this page. But ultimately, because they can just retain everything, so they just keep taking in. But they've never spent any time trying to identify what they want to hold on to and what they want to get rid of. They are just containers where you are dumping in everything. And you find this, by the way, not just in the study of Torah. People who believe and consider on equal footing news that they read on some website online with news that they happen to know personally or from an expert in the field. Correct? I remember once someone was telling me, they were like, oh yeah, I read this online. I was like, no, I don't think that's true. They're like, no, I saw it. I was like, okay, so forward it to me. They forwarded me the article. I just forwarded them back the same picture of the article with giant circles around the title of the website, which is The Onion, which is a satirical website that is there for the sake of humor. They're like, can you believe this? I was like, no, neither should you. It is a satirical website. But they didn't consider the source of the information. They didn't consider whether the information was important, whether the information was correct. Is this clear? The job of a student is not to be able to absorb everything. And in fact, sometimes there's a price you pay when you are a naive student. Number one, because you haven't thought it through. Number two, because the refinement process that happens when you choose what you want to remember. And I always tell students to do this. At the end of a class, if you cannot recap, not the whole class, not even the intentions of the speaker, but if you cannot recap what you learned from the class, what you took from the class, you wasted your time. By the way, if you can repeat every word that he said, the rabbi said, or the teacher said, then in some ways you've also wasted your time. Does that make sense? Yes? Go ahead. People with photographic memories oftentimes have a very surface level understanding of that which they remember, unless they spent the time going through it. You know, there are people who can recount entire pages from memory without actually having any reading comprehension. So, can I give you an example? Someone who has a photographic memory, if you ask them to write out for you the words of the page that they just memorized backwards, they can do so. If, as an example, I gave them a page of gibberish, they can memorize phone numbers on a phone book. It doesn't have to be sensical because they just have a picture of it. But the problem is when you have the capability of remembering a picture, what don't you do? You don't internalize. So the first type of student is sfog. You take in everything. No discernment. There's two opinions in the Rishonim what this means. No discernment whether something is right or wrong. But then Rashi says, never mind whether it's right or wrong, no discernment whether something is significant or insignificant. Okay? I want you to imagine a child for a minute. All right? You tell your child, listen, you know, I'm really sorry. I know you really want to get this, but I think that this is not an appropriate choice for you to get this movie, to get this game, to read this book. You're too young. It's a little too frightening. It's too afraid. It's too this. It's too that, right? You're telling the child all these things. I really think, you know, maybe you'll have bad dreams if you read this book at night, right? Maybe, you know, maybe you'll be very scared in the middle of the night. You're telling this child the whole thing. And then afterwards, the other parent comes home. Kid goes running up to the mother or the father and says, Daddy won't buy the book for me. Daddy won't buy, Mommy won't buy the book. Mommy said no. They didn't take in any of the information that you were trying actually to communicate. The only thing they took in was the part that didn't allow them to have, right? You see that? You ever see this with somebody? They'll have a whole class and then there'll be someone who raises their hand and says, well, I disagree with the characterization. That's so not the point. They took an insignificant detail And they turn that into the conversation. How many times has this happened in a conversation, in a relationship between you and your family, a husband, a wife, a parent, a child, where the point of the argument is so far from where, that's what you're taking from this? The mark of a good student, of someone who's taking, a good listener, is someone who's taking in the information, but not taking in all the information. Your husband might be yelling, your wife, your child might be yelling at you. Don't take in all the words that they said. Discern. What did they really say? And a good listener can turn around, even at the end of a diatribe from a child, saying, this is your fault, why did you do this? A good listener could say, I hear that you are upset. I understand that you were let down. And the kid, you're so mean, and you're so this, and a fog holds on to all those adjectives. But if you're discounting that which is incorrect, if you're discounting that which is insignificant, you actually really heard the child. You really heard your husband. What we're learning over here is a visual technique for how to sit and listen to someone. Now today, there are many studies that have come out about the art of listening. There's something called active listening. Anyone familiar with that? What's active listening? Anyone know? Active listening is when you're listening to the person, you then iterate back to them. So what you're saying is, and you repeat that which they just said, to illustrate to the person, I've heard this point that you've made. So the person is upset. Well, how come you told the other kids that they could go, right? You must be very upset that the other kids got a chance to go and you didn't get to go. Active listening shows the person that you're listening. But also, could you imagine if in the middle of the thing you say, you're saying that I'm unfair? What's the child going to express? Even though he did say that. That's not the point, Ma. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying I really want to go. I'm saying I'm upset. The nature of the Yoshvim Lifnei HaChachamim is the process of understanding how to absorb, choose what to absorb, okay? And to make that a part of a person's life. So I want to try the concept of active listening, okay? With regards to bringing knowledge on board. Not with regards to hearing someone's complaints for a minute. Let's say, as an example, you're sitting in a class, all right? The rabbi or the teacher is explaining an idea, a concept in tzedakah, in judgment, in forgiveness, in understanding, okay? You don't have to speak this out loud in order to do this process. Active listening would mean saying to yourself, so what he's saying is, there's a story that illustrated the point. Don't go home with the story. Okay, you can. But the point is, the story was there to illustrate, to articulate the point with all of its emotion, with all of its real world applications. If you went home with the story, you missed the point. Ironically though, if all I gave you was the points, and I didn't give you the story, the way of taking that idea and plugging it into 2021 to December 2021, then also I've not allowed you, I haven't showed you what I'm really trying to say. So when you're listening to a class, active listening would mean, what does this mean for me right now? So all of you come to class. You know what else I've noticed? I noticed that as a student in yeshiva, I struggled with a little bit of a dichotomy. If I wrote notes, I remembered the class. But if I wrote notes, I also wasn't fully present in the class. What was the better choice? To write notes and be preoccupied with getting down every word that my rabbi said, but then I'm not actually thinking along with the process because I'm busy writing it. Or the other hand, get it, but forget it. And eventually, sorry?
Or just
So what I had to learn to do as time went on was not to write the words that he was saying, but to take the concept and even maybe not write the whole concept, because that also takes refinement. But just say, proof that the Gemara must only be talking about this case. Okay? Contradiction between this piece and another piece. And allowing the structure, just the building blocks, to be written down in the notes I was taking, really helped me accomplish both things. So ironically, in many ways, this Mishnah is not a Mishnah. This class is not a class. It's a class about a class. It's a class about how to attend class. Okay? Now, if we're taking this seriously, then that's very important. That's a very important process. So let's try as an example of thinking of ourselves, and I want to point out something which I think is really, it's a little bit disconcerting. You know what I've noticed? That these 4 characteristics of a person who takes in everything, a person who takes in nothing, a person who takes only the bad, and a person who takes only the good, those are not 4 different types of people. It's also the same person in 4 different scenarios. To some people, we are a sfog. And to some people, we are a mashpech. Right? I want you to think about who in your interpersonal relationships you are a sfog with. There are people in our lives that are very important. Sometimes they're quite high-strung. Sometimes there's a lot of ramifications. You know, if you got something wrong, right? Or if you didn't do it the way that they wanted. So what do? You become a sfog from that person. Person says, better not be like this, or I think we should do it that way, or, I don't think you should. You're taking in everything. You're listening to everything. You're scared about losing anything. And meanwhile, you wound up losing the forest for the trees. Then there's some people, mashpech. Oh, this person's such a nudge. They come to you, before they even open their mouth, you already decided, you're not going to listen. You're just dumping everything that they say. As it comes, you're trying to get out of the conversation as fast as you can. With whom are we in mishameret? Which conversations do we go into when we're only going to retain the insignificant or the bad or the incorrect? People who we don't like very much. Not nudges, not whiners. A person that you want to see as evil. You want to see them as the evil mother-in-law, father-in-law, sister-in-law. She's like, can I help you with your bar mitzvah? You're like, what, like I'm incapable of preparing my own bar mitzvah? I can't breathe over here. Tell your sister to back off. There's some people that we approach the conversation. We've already decided we are a mishameret. We're only going to retain the evil parts of that conversation. And any other part, we're just going to dump it down the wayside. But your husband would be like, but she also offered to help. Like, she told you she was just going to pick up stuff from the store for you. In what way is she imposing her will if she just wanted? She's like, yeah, she's probably only doing that so that when she then comes, she could tell me not to use those plates. Mishameret. Right? That's who for that person, we've already decided mishameret. And then there's some people, napa. Napa. Your husband doesn't like your mother. He's telling you all the things your mother said. You're like, no, that's not what she meant. My mother's so nice. He's sifting it all out, only taking the fine flour. So in many cases, these 4 midot are actually representative of people with whom we are a sponge, a funnel, a strainer, or a sieve. So sometimes, and this is an interesting thing, we have to learn to become something else for someone else. So first of all, do you have a person in your life? I just want to, just a show of hands. I want you to think of someone with whom you are a sponge. You take everything that they say very seriously because you're very nervous with them. Anyone? You got one? You got a sponge? Okay. Second person, I want someone that you just dump everything that they say. You just can't wait to get out of the conversation with them. Yes? You got it? Yeah, we got one? Okay. Jessica's nodding at me. Okay? Yes? No, I'm just That was too easy, sorry. And I'm the one at the end of that, so I'm allowed to make, okay, fine. The second one is mashpech. That you just, you know what, you're not taking, the third one is mishameret. You have someone in mind that the only thing you hear from them is negative, like you see them and you're annoyed. And then they open up their mouth and you're like, you see, I knew it. I knew you were going to annoy me, and you did. I'm a prophet. You're not a prophet. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Because you only held on to the negatives, to the incorrect, right? You got one? Everyone's got a mashpech? A mishameret, excuse me? Okay, and finally, napa. Who's your napa? I thought it was really funny, actually, by the way, that napa, which is a classic term associated with wine, is actually here. The is not the wine one, is the flour one. But don't get confused, right? You have a napa that everything they say, you only look at the positive. You only think, wow. You're taking out only the nuggets. Wow, this person is so. I remember going to a class from a certain rabbi, and he was brilliant, but he waffled a lot. It was worth going to an hour and a half class because he would put in maybe once, twice, three times in the whole hour a one-sentence line that was worth putting in a box, taking home, sticking up on your refrigerator. One of those guys. So there was a lot of gravel, but every once in a while you got the most incredible diamonds. And I gladly would go to his class all the time. Again, of the hour, you had 5 minutes, 3 minutes of pure genius. And it was worth it. Well, it's interesting because I was a napa. I was taking those things out, but I still consider him to be an incredibly wise man. Someone else might look at the same person and say 97% of that was useless. But sometimes the 3% in time is worth 100% in quality. There's a lot of people sometimes in our lives that take up a lot of time, but the things that they give us in a short amount of time that was positive can outweigh someone else who's giving in a much more constant and consistent way, but is giving of much less value. Does that make sense? So one of the things I think that this Mishnah does, just by giving us awareness, is that it allows us to change our modality because we are aware of our modality. So I want you to imagine for 1 minute, just for 1 minute, a psychologist. What is the job of a psychologist? Which one of these four? Mashpech. So not hold on to anything. So separating is not mashpech.
Okay, next.
No, you did exactly what I wanted you to do. Because you're right and you're wrong. So which one is a psychologist? Sieve, strainer, right? Sponge or funnel?
It depends on the situation. Deceive?
Sorry, it depends on what?
Situation.
Explain.
If you're going to the therapist to just talk, then they're the sponge. They're taking it all in. If you're going for advice and asking them to feedback, behavior modifications or whatever, then they're sifting through what you're saying, and so I don't think it's one. It's all of them, or depending on the situation.
It's all of them. I don't know if it's depending on the situation. You know why?
Why?
Because the psychologist only finds out which one they need to be at the end of the session.
Oh, you're saying it's a one-time shot?
No, I'm just giving as an example,
Okay.
right? So you only find out after you've heard the stuff. You'll only find out later. But hold on a second. If you are a psychologist and you take in everything, you will be a very unhealthy psychologist.
That's what I'm saying.
Mashpech. You need to hear it and spill it in the garbage. My wife says to me all the time, I don't know how you are a normal person. And I say, who told you that I am a normal person? Lies! Okay? No, because you hear all this stuff. And people are putting this on your back. They're crying to you, heartbroken, middle of the night. It's a lot. How do you deal with it, not go crazy? The answer is, on one level, on one dimension, you take everything that came in, you spill it right in the garbage. On the other hand, if you're a psychologist who doesn't have empathy, you're not going to do your job either. So on one dimension, you have to get rid of all of it. Okay? On another level, what does the psychologist have to do? Napa. They need to sift out all the things that you've just said and find all the important things. Correct? So then maybe a psychologist needs to be a napa and a mashpech. But hold on. You come to your psychologist, your therapist, and you're telling about your relationships, and the therapist, could you imagine the therapist saying this? And then I want you to tell me which of the four this is. This therapist says, everything you're saying sounds really nice, but there's these three things that you said that are really throwing up red flags. I'm really worried about these things. These things sound toxic. That's a strainer. So it's the job of the therapist not to get blinded by the good parts of this guy or of this boss or of this whatever, to throw that all kind of aside and literally find the negatives. Isn't this interesting? So what the person is, in many ways, depends on what is the function of this conversation. And by the way, who this therapist has to be also depends on who the patient is. Watch. The patient is a person who falls in love very easily with anyone and everyone. What's a therapist's job? To point out all the negatives, all the challenges, all the toxic parts that they need to be aware of, correct? So the therapist becomes a negative Nelly. Switch a scenario, time's up, 1:00. Who comes in next? The person who only ever sees the negatives in every person they ever go out with. What's a therapist's job? Shift gears, napa. Right? A little secret for you. All of us are full-time therapists. If you're in a relationship, you're a therapist. If you have friends, you're a therapist. If you have children, you're a therapist. Everyone. When we listen to people, when we talk to people, when we're at work, you have to be, people come to you with their problems, with their issues, even if it's just from the people in your own office. I'm having trouble. What do you recommend I do? This person is being really unfair, right? What do you do? Well, you watch the person sitting in front of you. You think to yourself, which of these do I need to be here? So this is a really important Mishnah, not just about learning, but in terms of wisdom in general, and offering wisdom. What do I need to be? And ironically, what I need to be sometimes is decided by what the person in front of me has chosen to be. So if they've chosen to be a sponge, you might turn around and say, right? Well, okay? So the challenge, I believe, is in sometimes recognizing when we are unwittingly, or we have unwittingly become one of these things, and inappropriately so. If I'm listening to my husband, my wife, my children, my friend, whatever, and I'm finding all the negative things about them, so I've become a strainer. How do I shift from a strainer and into a napa? How do I do that? It's a very difficult reversal. It's the exact opposite. Correct? How does someone do that? How do you change this element of yourself? I don't think people are exclusively one thing. I don't think that they are. So sometimes the only way to move from a mishameret to a napa is to travel via Spongeland. You get me? Does everyone understand? So let's say I'm in a relationship with someone. I'm listening to someone, and all I'm picking up is the negative things, the bad things, the wrong things. And I sense that that's who I have become. That I'm picking up all the wrong things from this person. I don't want the relationship to be that way. I want to find positives. It's very difficult to shift from one end of the spectrum to the other. How do I do that? I travel via Spongeland. Spongeland is where I don't decide to go from only picking up the negatives to only picking up the positives. I go from only picking up the negatives to also picking up the positives. And after I have become a sponge for some time with this person, I can then become a sieve with this person. Okay? So the person says negative things. You decide to myself, I want to change this. It's too hard to just see only the positives because there's so many glaring negatives. So you know what we say? Notice the negatives. Just right alongside the column of the negatives, notice the other stuff too. Put them both on the paper. And you might still believe that this person is a bad person on balance. I don't care. That's Sfogland, Spongeland. At the end, after you have everything in front of you, you can start leaning in towards the other column. By the way, same thing is true the other way around. Mr. Wonderful, but he's an abusive alcoholic. But he's wonderful. Sfog, taking everything and then start to shift into a little bit more of a critical analysis of the person. Now, I always found it very interesting that in English, the word critical means negative, but the word critical also means thorough. So critical analysis of something doesn't mean that you're criticizing in your analysis. It means that you're really paying attention. It's very thorough, your analysis. Sometimes the job of a person who's trying to make a thorough analysis is to recognize the downsides of a specific scenario, of a specific person, of a specific approach at life or whatever. Okay? So I think this Mishnah is teaching us a tremendous lesson. Let's go to the mashpech, because I feel like we've given the other three a little bit of love. But let's deal with the mashpech. There are people in everybody's life, again I'm going to say this unequivocally and unabashedly. There are people in everybody's life who do not deserve a sfog, who do not deserve a napa, who do not deserve a mishameret. Mashpech. They say something, you throw it in the garbage. I don't believe that that's a decision we come to easily or lightly about a person. But there are people. You have a person who's constantly talking about everybody. In Jewish, they would call it narishkeit. What's narishkeit? Childish nonsense. Gossip about everybody. Rumors. Nobody even doesn't even know. How could you possibly know that? Oh, you know what? This is why he did that. How do you know why he did that? Were you in his head? Lashon hara. Some people are so busy, napa, right? And mishameriting the information, like, oh, which part of the story that he said was true? Did the person do that? Didn't they do that? What was their intention? Take the whole conversation in one ear, out the other. There are people in life that's the only approach. It takes a while to discern that this is that kind of a person. And by the way, just because they've been in that box once doesn't mean that they have to stay there. But until further notice, this person is a toxic, negative ball of energy that all they put out is self-defeating, critical talk, everything that they say. Now, you know what? Some people would tell you, oh, listen to what they're saying. Take the good points of their Don't. Don't waste your time. Don't waste your time. Mashpech. I have decided over time to become a mashpech. When it comes to things I read online, social media, on the news stations, about vaccines. Mashpech, I just throw it in the garbage. Pro, negative, because whoever's writing pro is already pro. Whoever's writing negative is already negative. There's nothing there. There's nothing there. It's everyone just shouting what they think louder. You read about politics online. Mashpech. Garbage. You can't believe anything. You can't believe anything. Now, it's a sad state of affairs that's where we have arrived at. But this ability to recognize when something is, there's actually truth in something, and to be able to discern, yes, no, how much, valuable, not valuable. Part of the process is not in determining what within a conversation is right, wrong, significant, insignificant, but which people having conversations are right, wrong, significant, insignificant. And you know what? Save yourself the time and energy and don't even bother listening to them at all. Mashpech. Now, do they deserve a chance to rectify that? Yeah, absolutely. But until further notice, I had someone who would come around my house in England all the time. And I don't know why exactly, versions of the story. He's very upset at a rabbi, at a certain shul. 99.9999% of the time, if he was going to come up to me to have a conversation, this is what it was about. The rabbi did this, the rabbi said that, the synagogue did this, they didn't do that, oh, kill me now. And you know what the 0.00001% of the time was? Where it wasn't about that? It was like, pass me the coffee. Pass me the coffee. You know what the rabbi said? It was only en route to talking more about. Eventually, mashpech. If I saw the person coming towards me in the crowded kiddush, avoid. What benefit was there? to me, to him, to the world, that we should sit and spend an hour of our time, what was achieved? Okay? That's mashpech. I have people come sometimes to me in the synagogue. They want to talk to me about someone else in the synagogue. This person did this, they're wrong, they're this, a crook. Mashpech. Now, if there's something of substance, fine. But what was hilarious to me was I had a certain person came to talk to me about how, and then a little while later, someone's in conversation. The guy's like, look, I was dealing with that guy. He's just a crook. And I was like, oh, what goes around comes around. Mashpech. Why do you have to believe? Why do you have to take on? Why do we need to take in any of this? What is the value? You know, in the world today, it has been deemed that salacious news about people, celebrities, this is something everyone should know. Everyone needs to know. This is newsworthy. What are we filling our brains with? Like, what kind of person are we turning into when this is something that flags our attention? In today's day and age, I think mashpech is unfollow, unsubscribe, delete. It's so important to be able to do this. I was standing with a young man the other day, super cool guy. Very cool, very, with it, does well in his life, everything like that. He said, oh, this is amazing, I love the class. Where can I follow the class? I told him, I said, what do you prefer, video, audio? He says, I like video more. I said, well, it's on every day, it's uploaded to my Instagram. He goes, Rabbi, I deleted Instagram. I said, Hazaku Baruch. Great. Well done. I said, don't say you're sorry. I'm super happy. You want to get to class? Go to Torah anytime. Because you know what else appears around the class? Other classes. Not what some stupid celebrity did with some other stupid celebrity while she was married to a third stupid celebrity. Yeah. Why do we do it? Because if people are there anyway, maybe after the stupid celebrity video, Instagram will say, have you seen this class from Rabbi Farhi? And maybe there'll be some value. And maybe they'll have some sense, if people are there anyway. But this is a guy who's understood the nature of what this is doing to him. And he's decided, I don't want to sit and sift between the good and the bad. I don't want to decide to be left with the bad. I don't even want to decide to be left with the good. You know what I'd rather? Mashpech. Someone I know from this office was telling me that after months and months and months of depressing news, that they've consciously decided to stop knowing what's going on. What? Yeah. And you know what? It don't even matter. Because what is the news giving you?
It's important you'll find out mental stress.
Mashpech. Recognize your needs. Recognize. Admit, understand, recognize. Smart. Come on. I'm sorry that you're going to have less friends at the end of this class than you started with. Go on a purge. Go on an unfollow purge. And the same way you could unfollow online, you could unfollow in person too.
Correct. How do you correct those people? How do you
It's not your job. to correct anybody.
You only can fix yourself.
Fix yourself. Fix yourself. Now, if one of those people is your kid,
Send them to you.
how do you fix your kid? Well, the first thing is model these things yourself so that your kid can see. Okay, the last thing I wanted to point out before I actually have to run today because I don't want to catch them before they fly. I'm going to meet them in the airport. So the last thing I wanted to talk about is creating in our minds, okay, and you don't need to use the words of the Mishnah. But I would like to, because in all the other scenarios, I don't know if you noticed, in all the other scenarios in the Mishnah, we gave plus minus values. So just as an example, when we talked about the different kinds of people who give tzedakah, we talked about a person who gives and encourages others to give, a person who doesn't give and wants other people to give, a person who doesn't want to give, who doesn't want others to give, a person, right? Remember that? We talked about positive. It was just plus minus values, right? And it was the same as well. When a person who goes to the Bet Midrash, goes and he learns, he goes and he doesn't learn, he doesn't go and he learns, he doesn't go and he doesn't learn. Plus minus values. Over here, when it came to the 4 midot of Yoshvim Lifnei Chachamim, we all of a sudden went with visuals, with a mashal. And you know what that tells me? It tells me that the Mishnah understood that this message was something that cannot live as a theoretical, spectrum. It needs to be something that can visually be recalled all the time. So let's try together to create a 4-part visual which we can use and pull up at any moment. Sfog is a good one. Sfog, sponge. I'm taking in everything. Sorry? No, the chacham is napa. Right? Is the discerner. He takes out only the valuable. But as an example, if you're a parent and you're listening to your child after they come back on that first day from a new school, what do you want to be? You want to be a sponge. You want to take in everything. The positives, the negatives, without making a judgment call. Because you need to remember all those different things to ultimately make a judgment call later. Correct? So, when we go into a conversation, when we go into a class, when we're listening to something, a dvar chokhmah, when we're listening to somebody speak, someone asked me a while ago, they said, could we have this person come and speak in the Bet Knesset? They're not religious, they don't do this, 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 but they're a very nice person. Could we have that person come and give a speech in the shul? Because you're holding the person up as a role model. Right? Is this fair? Well, what does the answer to that depend on? It depends on the people sitting in the shul. What are they? Are they sponges? That can be dangerous then. What's even worse is if they're mishameret. They're the people that took only the bad from him. They're like, oh, Rabbi Farhi brought this guy. He doesn't keep Shabbat. He doesn't eat kosher. He doesn't do this. He doesn't do that. And they ignored all the positive stuff, which is why we brought it, let's say, as an example. Okay? So it's a dangerous thing. But let's just have in our mind these 4 options. And I want you to be able to decide, almost like it's on your screen. Okay? You're swiping which mode you're in. So number 1 is sfog. I'm paying full attention to the positives and negatives. Okay? That's number 1. What's the second visual? After the sponge. Does mashpech work for you? A funnel. Is that a good visual for you? Where you're just pouring everything out? I don't know, for me, funnel never worked. Because like you're pouring it in and it gets narrow and at the bottom, like it feels like something is happening there. I kind of feel like I would rather just a fun, it's just a drain. For me, the image of mashpech is the drain at the bottom of the bathtub. You listen to the person, and it just drain. Drain is our second image. Tell me if this works for you. We need to have this visual so we can kind of go through it quickly. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw a few scenarios at you. And then you'll flick through and tell me what you want to do. Okay? One more time. So we've got first one, sponge. We good with that one? Yes? Second one, drain. We good with that? Don't retain it at all. Let it go right through, right out the door, into the sewer. Okay? Next one, holding on. Mishamet, holding on to the bed. What's our visual for that? Sorry? Strainer? Yeah, is that good for everybody? Do people use strainers?
No, but you still use it for a strainer. It's like you keep your pasta and you throw away your water, so maybe that's not good.
So then let's use that for napa. Okay? But again, what is an example of something that you use where you're holding on to the bed? Coffee grind. Okay, everyone use that? You just find something that works for you, where you're only holding on to the bed. No, not in the first example. You're holding on to the bed, and you're holding on to the bed. I mean, I've got an example, but it's totally gross. Please tell you? Spare you or tell you? You guys got to decide. Tell you. Urine sample. Now you go to the doctor, and like you're holding on to this thing which you would normally be thrown away. But think about that. That's what you're doing when you hold on to the negatives from somebody. And you imagine walking around with a urine sample, but not for any purpose. Just, I have this in my pocket. I'm walking around with. It's weird, right? But this is what I want though. You want an image that will actually stick in your brain. So that when you're doing it, you think to yourself, why would I do this? Yeah.
Maybe a mousetrap?
A mousetrap. Okay. This is getting only worse, right? But the worse the image is, the less you'll do it. That's a mashmeret, where you're holding onto the bed. By the way, as I said earlier, there are times when you need to be in mashmeret. And as an example, when you're at the doctor's office, where the purpose is to analyze the bed. There it makes sense. But ask yourself, in the same way it's distasteful, and you only do it if you absolutely must, that's how you do. That's when you opt for your urine sample. I need to. You know what? I like this guy. I like this girl. I want to go carry on. I'm looking at this person. Everything seems great. What are the negatives? What are the challenges that my child might face if she dated that person? Their job is to hold on to it for analysis. Right? Good? Now, by the way, you've analyzed it. This is a perfect example. Someone's going to date your child. You looked into this person. You're going to go on a date with someone. You've noticed something negative. Now you've decided, you know what? On balance, this person is a good person. They're worth it. Everybody here who has a relationship knows that the people they love have negatives about them. Correct? It was your job when you were starting the relationship to find those negative things. And then it is your job when you decide to stay in the relationship to throw it away. You get me? Okay? The last one is when you're straining something and taking the good stuff. So maybe a spaghetti strainer might be, because there you really feel like, I don't know how many of us are sifting flour over here. Sorry? Gold. How many of us are sifting gold? We need to hang out with you, clearly. Well, all of us are sitting here with pasta. It's a much better exercise. Yeah? But again, it needs to be something you can access immediately. All right? Let's go through it. I'm just going to throw some case at you. There's no wrong answers. You go into a job interview, and the person is telling you the responsibilities that you have at work. Which one are you? Sponge. Absolutely. Sponge, everyone agree? Yeah? Sponge. He hires you. Now you work there. He tells you your job responsibilities. Which one are you?
Still a sponge.
Nope. Huh? You're a Napa. You're finding all the positive and important things that he's saying.
If you think they're positive.
Once you're hired, it is like I said earlier, once you've decided that you're committing to this relationship for the foreseeable future, until the person proves themselves not to be Napa worthy, not to be the strainer worthy, then what happens? Could you imagine all the time bringing the spaghetti with the water to the table and just slopping the stuff on the people's plates? It's horrible, right? No one can live like that. You can't, you're trying to decide if this guy is worthy of your daughter, the girl, and you're holding on to the negative things that you've managed to catch. You're literally threatening the relationship. At that stage, you need to be the Napa, the one that finds the positive things about this person. That's where you need to be. Now again, will it change at some stage? You might need to shift back. All of a sudden you realize that the guy's a control freak, etc., etc. You might need to go back from Napa to Mishameret, okay? All right, let's carry on. Family member. What are you? Sorry? Give me the full answer. Depends on what?
How, how close, how I see him, like, is he important to me, is a positive person, negative person, like, this is how I see people, negative, positive, and then, I deal with that.
Okay, so
It depends,
you're making a decision, positive, negative, okay? Now let's say positive for a second. So negative, you drain.
Yeah.
Positive, okay? Now, which one of the three?
I'm gonna, it depends also on the story, like, let's say he came and, need my advice, I'm gonna be a sponge. If you wanna tell me something about someone, I can be mashpech, it depends, like, I can hear it, but,
So even in the positive scenario, let me decide now.
Yeah.
What do they need from me and who are they? Are they naive? Do they need me to point out the challenges? Are there someone who's very critical? They need me to point out the positives? Right? Or as an example, do they just need to vent? Mashpech, drain. When someone is venting, just throw it all out. The only purpose was for them to get it off their chest. The purpose of them getting it off their chest is not to put it on yours. Mashpech. Okay? When would you be a sfog?
When I need my, advice, so I can hear, and I can be a sponge.
Okay, so in the initial stage, when you're unsure what you need to be. You got that? When you're unsure what you need to be, sfog. Yeah, we getting it? Okay? This is how this works. And what the funny thing is, you can actually start to identify all the different people in your life, what you are with them, and really what you should be with them. You might find that you're getting it right a lot of the time. If you're getting it right a lot of the time, it means that intuitively you are a person who understands how to listen and how to be there for someone. If you're getting it right a lot of the time with people and getting it wrong a lot of the time with friends, or getting it wrong a lot of time with people that are very close with you, then it means, what does it mean then? It means that generally you're a good judge of character, but when something means a lot to you, you take it so sensitively that actually you make errors in judgment as what you should have been. You find that with people who are very patient with strangers, but completely impatient with their family. And then they have to ask themselves, why is that? Why is that? Sometimes it's because, it was an act. But it's not always because it's an act. Sometimes the reason why they're impatient with family is because they're expecting more from their family. They want to demand excellence. I'm not saying that that's a good move. I'm just saying that might be why you're choosing a certain path. That might be why a person is always mishameret with their kids. Nothing's good enough. But when they're with everybody else, they're like, oh, what a tzaddik, they're the best, you're so amazing. They never said those words to their own kids. Why? Either they're to show, really they are critical of them, or it's that's good enough for you, but it ain't good enough for my kids. I want my kids to be superstars. Mishamer, not good enough. You understand? At least be aware of why you are the way you are with the people you are that way with. That was a great sentence. It's one of those where you're like, hereunto referred to as the... Yeah? Hashem should bless us with the discerning knowledge to be able to understand how to sit in the Fnei Chachamim and to respond in the best possible way. Thank you.